5 Curious Facts You Didn't Know About Bible Stories. Explore the mysteries of the Bible with our video, where we will reveal 5 astonishing facts. You'll discover everything from Judas's betrayal to the divine manna from heaven. Learn the true essence of Apocalypse, the mysterious Ark of the Covenant, and the multiple versions of Noah's flood. Get ready for an enlightening experience with biblical stories like you've never seen before. Number 1. Judas Iscariot is known for betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Judas, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, is especially remembered for this act of betrayal. According to biblical narratives, particularly the accounts of Matthew and Luke, Judas agreed to hand Jesus over to the religious authorities in exchange for 30 pieces of silver, fulfilling an Old Testament prophecy that spoke of a set price for betrayal. This gesture of betraying his master was sealed with a kiss, a symbol of trust and friendship that became an emblem of treachery. The sum of 30 pieces of silver has been subject to various interpretations over time. Beyond its monetary value, which some studies suggest could equate to the price of a slave, its symbolic meaning is powerful. It represents the price of greed, the betrayal of the most sacred trust, and, for some, the painful reality that even those closest can be tempted to betray for earthly gain. Judas's story doesn't end with betrayal. The Gospels also narrate his profound remorse upon realizing the magnitude of his act. According to Matthew, Judas attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver and, consumed by guilt, ended up taking his own life. This outcome adds a layer of tragedy to Judas's figure, portraying him not only as a traitor but also as a deeply conflicted individual tormented by his actions. Number 2. The term apocalypse means revelation in Greek. The term apocalypse, commonly associated with visions of destruction and the end of times, has its roots in the Greek word apokalypsis, which surprisingly means revelation or uncovering. This Greek word is used to name the last book of the New Testament, commonly known as the Book of Revelation or the Revelation of St. John. Despite the modern connotations of catastrophe and chaos, the term in its original context carries a deeper and more spiritual meaning. In the biblical context, apocalypse refers to the divine revelation of secrets and future events granted by God to a human being, in this case, John the Apostle. This book of the Bible is filled with symbolism, prophetic visions, and encoded messages meant to offer hope and guidance to Christian communities facing persecutions and hardships at that time. It's interesting to note how a term that originally implied the revelation of divine knowledge and the promise of redemption has evolved over time to acquire a darker and more ominous meaning in everyday language. This transformation partly reflects the mysterious and often unsettling nature of the visions contained in the Book of Revelation, as well as the human tendency to focus on the more dramatic and catastrophic aspects of prophecies and revelations. Number 3. The Ark of the Covenant is described in detail in the book of Exodus. The Ark of the Covenant, a central piece in the biblical narrative, is described with great detail in the book of Exodus, specifically in chapters 25 to 31. This sacred artifact not only represents a deeply revered religious element but also stands as a testament to the meticulous artistry and craftsmanship of the time. According to Scripture, it was God Himself who provided the instructions for the construction of the ark. The specifications included exact dimensions, materials, and ornaments, reflecting the importance and sacredness of the object. The ark was to be built from acacia wood and covered in pure gold, both inside and out. Its measurements were 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high, showcasing the precision in its design. Upon the ark, 2 golden cherubim were to be placed, facing each other with their wings extended upward, spanning over the ark's lid, known as the mercy seat. This detail was not merely aesthetic. It was believed that the presence of God manifested between these cherubim, marking the ark as a meeting place between the divine and the earthly. The contents of the ark are also of significant importance. Inside, the tablets of the law, the 10 commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai, a jar of manna, and Aaron's budding staff were kept. Each of these elements symbolizes key aspects of the relationship between God and the people of Israel, emphasizing guidance, sustenance, and divine authority. The ark not only served as a receptacle for sacred objects but also played a crucial role in religious practices and experiences of the people of Israel. It was carried during their journeys and pilgrimages, symbolizing God's continuous presence among His people. Furthermore, the ark had a prominent role in ceremonies and rituals, especially on the Day of Atonement when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies to sprinkle sacrificial blood on the mercy seat, signifying purification and atonement for sins. Number 4. The story of Noah's flood is found in different cultures around the world, not just in the Bible. The narrative of the flood in the book of Genesis describes how God, grieved by the wickedness of humanity, decides to cleanse the earth by sending a devastating flood. However, God chooses Noah, a righteous man, and instructs him to build an ark to shelter his family and pairs of every animal species to preserve life on earth. After 40 days and nights of relentless rain and the subsequent waiting period on the ark, the waters finally recede, and Noah's family, along with the animals, repopulate the world. What intensifies the intrigue of this tale is its appearance in numerous cultures, which, though separated by oceans and millennia, share astonishing similarities in their own stories of a great flood. From Mesopotamian epics like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which recounts the story of Utnapishtim and his salvation ship, to legends of massive floods in Hindu, Greek, Norse, and indigenous traditions of America, Africa, and Oceania. These narratives, while differing in characters, geography, and details, converge at the core of the story: a catastrophic flood, often sent by one or more deities, the salvation of a select group of humans and animals, and a subsequent restoration of life on Earth. This recurring pattern has led researchers to explore various interpretations, from the hypothesis that they reflect real events of massive floods in antiquity, possibly exacerbated by the end of the last ice age, to the idea that these stories symbolize cycles of destruction and renewal deeply ingrained in the human psyche. Number 5. Manna is the food that God sent from heaven to feed the Israelites in the desert. This heavenly food is primarily mentioned in the books of Exodus and Deuteronomy and is a fundamental part of the narrative of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt to the Promised Land. According to biblical narrative, after their liberation from slavery in Egypt, the Israelites found themselves wandering in the desert, facing the vastness of the arid land and a shortage of food. In this context of need and desperation, God is said to have intervened miraculously to provide for His people. Manna is described as a food that fell from the sky every morning, except on the seventh day, the Sabbath, which is the day of rest in Jewish tradition. It has a peculiar description. It is compared to coriander seeds, white in color, and said to taste like bread with honey. This food not only served as a source of sustenance but also as a test of faith and obedience, as the Israelites were instructed to gather only the amount needed for each day, trusting that God would provide again the next day. Any attempt to hoard it resulted in spoilage, except on the eve of the Sabbath, when they were allowed to gather double to cover the Sabbath as well.